satu, cek satu, cek, cek satu, cek satu, cek satu, cek, cek, cek satu, cek satu, cek satu, cek satu. Udah, udah nih. Coba suara yang tadi, yang dari situ.
Tes.
Cek, 1, 2, 3,
Cek 1 2 3 untuk yang di Zoom. Cek 1 2 3 untuk yang di Zoom. Oh 1 2 3 cek 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 SPB cek. Oke. Cek sound oke. Di saya agak keras di sini tapi it's okay lah. Yang penting di sana dengar bagus ya. Oke. Baik. Oke, can we start? Is it okay with everyone? Need more time? Okay. Welcome everyone. Good morning. Selamat pagi Bapak Ibu semua, baik yang di ruangan ini di Perpustakaan Nasional maupun yang berada di Zoom. Terima kasih banyak atas perkenannya dan waktunya yang diberikan hari ini. Sekali lagi mohon maaf, kita tidak bisa mulai on time seperti di schedule, sedikit mundur karena tim Prof. Jeff dan teman-teman ada delay pesawat dari Malaysia baru terbang dan baru tiba dini hari tadi. So we are really grateful for Jeff, Prof. Jeff, Saf, Prof. Wing, Prof. Mazlin, Emma Torres, and the team for making the effort to come all the way from all over the world and even traveling in the very early morning and already here by now. So thank you so much and welcome again, everyone. So we're going to start today. Actually, initially this program was meant to be internal for SPB team, but we really don't want to miss the opportunity to have Professor Jeff Sark and the team to share the experience from the development of science panel. And really want to make use of this, the presence, and wanted to engage more people from everywhere that might be interested in, sorry suaranya agak berdengung ya, ini perlu dikurangin nggak? Ini ya, tim teknis, sorry. Berdengung suaranya. Masih oke tapi di Zoom ya? Oke, sorry. Yeah. So yeah, initially it was meant to be like small team meeting, but we really want to make the most of the presence of the expertise from the global expert. So here we are today. So we have more people, and hopefully we can engage this establishment of science panel for Borneo in a better way. So I'm just initiating this, and Pak Jatna, Prof. Jatna is going to lead the meeting today. And this is going to be informal. It's not like formal meeting. So without further ado, I would like to offer the place and time for Professor Jatna Supriatna. Please, Pak. Thank you.
Very good morning, everybody. Selamat pagi, Bapak Ibu sekalian. We are very honored to be here, and especially in this building, the National Library. Bapak Ibu, Prof. Jeffrey Sah. I knew that he just arrived this morning. So, Professor Wingbu, Ibu, I say Ibu, Ibu Emma Torres, thank you for coming.
the President of Indonesian Academy of Science, Professor Daniel Bodiarso. Thank you very much. Pak Aludohong, former Vice Minister of Environmental and Forestry, Professor Taufik Abdullah, member of the Indonesian Academy of Science, Pak Laude, still ada kemitraan Pak? Oke, still kemitraan. NGOs, fellow researchers, scientists, practitioners, decision makers, and friends. I'm really happy that I guess this is the second time for Jeff and Prof. Wingbu here during this SPB meeting. The last time is in Tanah Abang. I forgot, it's like in July this last year. And the most important thing is that for those also in online, I'm really sorry that good morning to everybody from Malaysia, from Mazlin, Mokhtar, and from Brunei, Professor Pariris Basilis, and also from many others. I think the idea of this meeting, as mentioned by Pak Narto, is trying to share what the experience of the science panel for Amazon, but also science panel for Congo, which has been done earlier than us. I think this is very good. That's going to be sharing by Ibu Emma Torres, what does really the science panel is about. But also it's very important that we're going to hear the perspective from current situation, global current situation from Professor Jeffrey Shah. And I think this is very important. I just with him the day before yesterday at the Kuala Lumpur with the ASEAN workshop on sustainable development. As you may know, that the SPB was launched during the COP29 in Baku, Azerbaijan, in November last year. So we're really happy that finally it's really launched in the Indonesian pavilion, and we are really happy that attending many dignitaries and member of the parliament, member of the government, and also international collaborators in the Baku meeting. So for this time, and I think we're going to have sharing what the update of the science panel of Borneo. We had, of course, the still a cluster. I think we have so many cluster. I think finally you have the group of 5 cluster. One cluster is about the flora and fauna. One cluster is about the economy and social. One cluster about the water resources and energy. The other one is cluster about the geology, setting landscape, and so on and so on. So I see that from the WhatsApp group in Indonesia, WhatsApp group is always, we had so many progress related to how do we work, because finally I think we're going to present it during the COP30 in Brazil, in Belém. So hopefully that we can be finished by then. But step by step, I think we're going to have a kind of explanation from in Malaysian side. I think we're going to have by online from Professor Mazlin Mokhtar, And from here, I will start explaining about what progress in this writing or making this science panel for Borneo. So without further ado, I would like to invite the President of Indonesia Academy of Science, Professor Daniel Murdiarso, who will welcome speech on this science panel for Borneo. Silakan Pak.
Thank you, Jatna. It's been my pleasure to welcome you all here today in a very important gathering of the science panel, especially on Borneo, but we will be hearing also the experience in the Amazon. So SPA, SPB, when are you going to have SPC? I would suggest that's the one. Because in my capacity as scientist at C4 and IPB, we've been working in these three important hearts of the tropical forest. So Indonesia, Brazil, and the Congo Basin. I think that's very appropriate. So good to hear that. Well, in my capacity as the president of the academy, I would like to welcome you all, the SDB family, SPB family, and also SDSN in this building. So we are very privileged to be hosted. Like the National Academy of Science in the US, we are hosted by the National Library. We have 2 floors in this nice building in floor 17 and 18. So anytime if you feel free to come and drop the line and we can host you, we have a number of meeting rooms as well there. So it's really for public. So the academy is very open for everybody who's going to talk about science, the society, etc. So we've been established since 1980 by the law as the academy. So in terms of legal status, the academy is very, very important and also very strategic in terms of engaging with stakeholders, any kind of stakeholders, including the government, private sector, and also local community, NGOs. We are having no wall for you people to work with us. Another fact about the academy is that we have 5 commission, we call it, dealing with basic science. We were holding a big event yesterday again in this building, but different floor, with the Ministry of Economic Coordination, Economic and Science and Higher Education to talk about AI and semiconductor. So that kind of community we have. And then also here we have our senior member from the social science. We are talking about many issues related to Indonesia and global social dynamic, whatever. These people are very, very resourceful when we are gathering here. And again, we are not just gathering together, but also make use of the resources we have for the rest of the community. So I was asking Pak Jatna, in addition to welcome you, that's only 3 or 5 minutes maybe. So in the original schedule, I was scheduled to say something for 20 minutes. So allow me to give you more about what you are going to discuss today, with your permission. I'm wearing another hat I have as a scientist working in tropical forests and more specifically on wetland. When we are talking about Borneo, I look up the old document of the heart of Borneo. I think many of you are involved in that. This is one of the famous picture, and in the document, it is said in Bahasa Indonesia, it's difficult to say heart. We cannot translate it like liver, but it's heart. And in Indonesian, it's jantung. And for Indonesian, Borneo is a bit, I don't know what you call that, not derogative, but at least it's much bigger than what we know, which is Kalimantan. So in the context of communication, I think talking about heart of Borneo is equally important. Talking about Jantung Kalimantan is equally important as heart of Borneo. So think about that when we are trying to communicate with people. I I, I met somebody writing about the Dayak, the long ears and things like that. And Kalimantan, they know that very well. And they are in the heart. And if you look at this map, very old map, a bit blurred, but you can see the elevation from the sea level, the higher, uh, the strong the beating of the heart, meaning that that area is hardly accessible. So the question here is access the main problem of any kind of destruction? Or is it driven by something else out of the context, like, I don't know, maybe tourism industry somewhere in Europe or in the US, or the need of oil or oil palm or coal somewhere else. But the heart is still beating because they have the resources. But the people, to some extent, suffer. So the ear is getting shorter. I heard the story about, not to appear like the local because they feel like inferior if you have that kind of identity. You need to be modern. Is that the solution? We do not know. So as scientists, I think we need to ask ourselves in how we address the issue of Borneo in the context of SPB and the rest of the panel. It may be important to really deeply rooted to the issue of the region itself. Next. This is very old map of, I think it's part of the Heart of Borneo report, but my colleague Florian Siegert produced this in 2005. Still, you can know by this color coding, you can see how untouchable the Heart of Borneo when you look at that. And when it is divided politically, next slide, suddenly it's part of 3 countries and things are getting more and more complicated. But if you look at the opportunity, from the opportunity point of view, it might be good to reassemble together and looking at this as the common opportunity rather than common enemy. When you look at that, the 75% is in Kalimantan or in the Indonesian part of Borneo. And certainly there are a lot of issues that we need to address when we are thinking about how we move ahead in terms of development, sustainable development, conservation, etc. So 23 million hectares of the Heart of Borneo. This is purely from that document. Next. You might remember the song by Peter Seeger, Wherever the Flowers Go. It's in a Grammy Hall. It's a famous hall now. That song, if you are of about my age, is very, iconic, this song. But it is equally iconic when you are thinking about wherever the forest gone. If you map that, again, this Heart of Borneo trying to map that in general, the green, dark green color is shrinking and driven by many different agenda from government to government, from era to era. When you get that logging, I still remember when I returned from the UK, when I finished my PhD back in 1985, that's somewhere around that bulldozer thing. I went to Kalimantan. It's my first field work to measure with tiny little thermometer. I'm climbing up the tree to get the profile of temperature. It was very dangerous task to do. And now we have power and things like that. But we could not afford to do that. But we already see a kind of signal that something is going wrong when you chop them down, even if selective logging, even if it's clear felling, it's even worse. And the end result of that, if we were lucky, was replaced by large, very large plantation of what we call stranger or invasive species. Pinus caribea were planted in Kalimantan, East Kalimantan, where IKN is sitting now. And it was terrible because this new species, we call it non-native species, building the so-called fox tailing. And when it reached the age of perhaps 3 or 4 years, everything fall down or broken because of this fox tailing phenomena. So basically, the replacement of tropical forest with plantation failed. You can see the remnant when you visit IKN now. Tiny eucalyptus, acacia, but it was recently planted. But it was in 1985, clear fell, large scale. And you can guess what's to follow. Oil palm. Not only East Kalimantan, but the entire Kalimantan. I'll show you the picture. And then after things clear up, that is dig it up to have coal, very recent one. Coal mining, especially in East Kalimantan, is rampant. Then the IKN comes. So that's the logo of Indonesian Ibu Kota Nusantara, IKN. So I think some of you, Jeff, you will be meeting the president to talk about this, I am sure. IKN is quite iconic for many Indonesian, and also big question mark whether it is going to put that green, dark green color back. Now reverse this kind of phenomena because the center of power will be there politically. It should bring something positively. At least that's the logical idea. And certainly that will be the attention, the center of attention of the globe, looking at Kalimantan in the middle of the archipelago, huge island. The size is maybe the third largest island in the world after Madagascar. Now, all gone, and we are expecting to be back, right? And in the panel, you might be talking about from various clusters. How can industries be put back in this dialogue in the panel? And industries should not, well, certainly it was and is still be extracting, but how can it be done sustainably? Next. Now, we were talking about mainly the inland forests in Borneo. And in many cases, wetlands are forgotten. Next week or week after, we will celebrate the Wetland Day, 2nd of February. Stick in my head because I've been working this, I don't know, 15 years or so. Looking at Kalimantan, this is what we will see everywhere, mainly in central and west Kalimantan. After being chopped down, the terrain is drained with huge size and length of canals. The network of canal is about 6,000 kilometers in central Kalimantan alone to get the landscape dry for plantation. And I'm a climate scientist looking at this landscape when you are talking about emission is massive. So the entire country land sector emission, 1/3 of it, 200 million tons per year is emitted from wetland. So that's quite significant if we do not forget the importance of lowland and wetland. I think the heart of Borneo is high up in the mountain, but this is the next, probably still going on, culprit. the entire wetland in West Kalimantan next. Being converted into oil palm is about 2.3 million hectares now. And East Kalimantan, because it's more hilly and mining is more prominent there, is less, but still large, 1.3 million. In West Kalimantan is 2 million. So that's the current 2023 data about 6 million hectares of oil palm. So when enough is enough. We have now about 19 million across Indonesia, but this is being discussed today about the government plan. Next slide. It is on the table now with the government that 20 million more will be converted for oil palm, among others, and mainly energy and food. So this is our challenge. So if you have any chance to talk with anybody in that power to say that, look, we do not want to see all this forest gone and wetland gone in Borneo. So can we do it better? I think that's the main message we should try to share. And how can science and community be part of that decision and implementation of potentially dangerous, calamity, catastrophic from the environmental point of view. I think that's the last of my slide. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Prof. Daniel Murdioso, for very, very insightful sambutan for this remark. And without further ado, I think because the time is a bit limited, I wish we can have more discussion on this, but maybe later on we can hopefully, Prof. Daniel can stay a bit longer, but he already have another meeting, maybe until around 11. So let's see if we can maximize this, the time. And for the next agenda, I think our next speaker will be Professor Jeffrey Shah to share about the establishment about the science panels and any other important issues that you would like to raise. I think the time is yours. Thank you.
Good morning, friends. Thank you for being here, and especially thank you for your scientific leadership and know-how and commitment to sustainable development in this unique part of the world that's your home, but is a home for unique biodiversity and is a treasure for the whole world. You are the stewards of this treasure, and you're the only ones that can save it. So my reason for being here and my colleagues' reason for being here is to help you to save your biological treasure and to ensure that doing so helps also the people of Indonesia and the people of this region. We're in a short window of 100 years where if we continue the way we're going, we will destroy nature that took hundreds of millions of years to evolve. And within a very short blink of the eye, we will destroy it. And that's underway very, very rapidly. It's underway almost everywhere in the world. Because as we just heard the question, how much is enough? For our governments, nothing is enough. I don't mean your government or my government as a special case. I mean all governments. All governments want to chop down forests, dig for minerals, mine for hydrocarbons, the future be damned. Honestly, it's relentless and it's global. Our economic system is not designed for sustainability at all. It's designed for harvesting the planet, converting the planet. The philosophers like John Locke in Britain at the end of the 17th century had the idea that the only value of land is if it's being managed by humans. Untilled land was viewed as something to be taken and used. When John Locke and his colleagues looked at the Americas, my part of the world, and they saw Native American populations living with low intensity agriculture or as hunter-gatherers or semi-nomadic peoples, their idea was, well, they're misusing the land. The land should be cultivated. The land should be harvested. The land should be controlled. The land should be converted. The forest should be chopped down and made into farmland. And the colonial mentality was, if the natives don't know how to do it, we, the English, do know how to do it. So we'll just take the land. And that was the philosophy, that unimproved land wasn't owned by anybody. It wasn't owned by native populations. It was for the taking of those who knew what to do. And what to do was to have human dominion over the physical planet and to turn it into wealth. That's basically our economic system. None of these inventors of capitalism asked about biodiversity, asked about sustainability, knew about evolution. By definition, these were ideas that were not existent. The science was not known. The idea of conservation was barely necessary. At best, conservation meant rotating your land every 2 or 3 years to replenish the soil, but not to hold a forest as a standing forest because of its biodiversity or its value in a more complex biosphere. These ideas are new ideas, but the economic system is an old idea now, several hundred years old, and it's designed to create financial wealth. And financial wealth doesn't measure biodiversity wealth. It doesn't measure natural capital. It doesn't value the long-term benefits. The idea is extraction. So there is nothing in the economic system that will save Borneo right now. Borneo will only be saved, and I can add the Amazon will only be saved, or the Congo Basin will only be saved, or other ecosystems and parts of our planet will only be saved if we make a conscious effort to overcome market forces, to say, no, that's enough palm oil, it stops here, and the rest is protected. And that is the biggest challenge that we face. We're just welcoming into office in 4 days a president who cannot understand a word that I just said. Honestly, I don't even mean it at a personal level. I'm just reflecting the reality. His mindset literally is you'd have to be crazy to leave oil and gas and coal under the ground. Why would you ever do that? Our goal is wealth. That's wealth. when he hired a classmate of mine, Bobby Kennedy Jr., to run the health department, he said to him, "You leave the liquid gold to me," meaning don't bother me about the oil and the gas. That's my department, said President-elect Trump. And what did he mean? He meant, we're going to drill, baby, drill. But it's not a trade-off for him. It's obvious. You'd have to be stupid not to drill in the mentality that prevails in the market economy. Why would you ever not drill? Why wouldn't you cut down forests? What are they doing? Palm oil makes money. Standing forest doesn't make money. Biodiversity doesn't make money except maybe a little tourism, so make a little park so tourists can come and see the species that are at the edge of extinction. But make money. So this is absolutely the overwhelming mindset in the world till today. It's not the mindset of scientific journals. It's not the mindset of UNDP reports. It's not the mindset of UN conferences. But I'm going to tell you a brutal secret. Those don't count. There's no money in that. The only reason the political leaders in my country give any heed at all to anything I might say is that their children go to school and have to study with me. So they want their kids in a good university. Other than that, the rest is kind of nonsense. We're not going to get solutions from the economic system. We're not going to get solutions from businesses that have self-control because they're not supposed to. They're supposed to make money. We're really not going to get solutions from governments in the first instance, except if we who do study, understand, appreciate, and value the real irreplaceable value of a standing forest and its biodiversity, are able to explain to the politicians, to the government ministers, why this could possibly matter, why this is the right thing to do. So this is really the charge, to explain, not to celebrate the biodiversity as it disappears, not to study what is about to be eliminated, not to make an interesting conference, though I love interesting conferences, but actually to save the Earth's physical systems before the next 20 or so years, which will bring them to an irreplaceable end. It's a little odd, but that's really our state of affairs, because our technology is so good that you really could chop down all the trees of Borneo. You really could replace them all with palm oil. And you could make a lot of money doing it in the short term, too. And you could go right up the heart of Borneo, up to the mountains now, because the technology is better. And you could probably plant in the mountains as well as the lowlands. There are no unreachable places anymore. This is quite amazing, because now we have satellites and we can geolocate, and we can have autonomous vehicles clearing the forests. We can have autonomous vehicles and autonomous mines where you don't even need miners anymore to do the mining. So there's no unreachable place. Not outer space, not the deep ocean, not the mountains of Borneo. We're just so good that within a generation we could destroy all of it. So that's my first proposition. First proposition is the markets will not save biodiversity. However much you may long for carbon markets or other things, they could be some modest tool. But the relentless drive to chop down the standing forest and replace it with something that seems to make money is extraordinarily powerful. Second proposition is only the scientists understand what's at stake. Because who else could? It requires knowledge. It requires understanding. It requires training. Donald Trump is not just being Donald Trump when he says, leave the liquid gold to me. He doesn't know. He never studied one day climate change. But literally, I'm just trying to understand the strange way that our world works. So they can't know. Only the scientists can know how the Borneo ecosystem works, how the Amazon ecosystem works. When we came to the case of the Amazon, the lead scientists explained to us laymen, the Amazon's on the edge of self-destruction because it's a critical nonlinear system where the moisture of the rainforest is self-generating from the forest itself. And if you lose around 35% of the forest, you destroy the basis for the rainforest for the remaining forest. So there's a tipping point, they explain. And then they explain we're just at the tipping point right now because 17% of the Amazon has been cut down and another 17% is seriously degraded. So we're just at the threshold where this tipping point is being reached and the rainforest in the Amazon basin could convert to savanna. It could just dry up. And that is being amplified by the warming of the planet, which is intensifying the convection from the Caribbean, which is meaning that dry air is now descending on the Amazon and intensifying the drying tendencies of the Amazon. I mention that for one reason, which is I didn't know that. It's my job to know something like that, but only a scientist can explain that based on a lot of research over many decades. That's the work, for example, of Carlos Nobre, who is a co-chair of the science panel for the Amazon. But the other point is only the scientists can tell the leaders about that. Only the scientists can explain to the politicians, look, this is more complicated than you think. A palm oil forest is not the same as an original forest. It changes the biodiversity. It changes fundamentally the nature of Borneo itself. And to say to the political leaders, you know, Borneo's biodiversity is unique in the world. It can't be found anywhere else in the world. So if we lose it now, it doesn't come back. It's irreversible. It's irreplaceable. And it's not just about Borneo, it's about the whole world. So do you want to be the administration that presides over the end of a resource of the planet that has been evolving for hundreds of millions of years, and now it's in your hands for the next 5 years? Probably they don't want to be in that position, but they can't understand it unless it's explained in a clear way. So my third proposition is you're the only ones that can save the ecosystems of this region, the scientists of this region, period. By the way, you'll have friends and colleagues around the world who will be rooting for you, but they can't do what you have to do because they don't know. They don't live in Borneo. They don't live in Papua. They don't live in this region. They don't understand this region. So you're the only ones in the whole world. Sorry to tell you, it won't be at the UN. It certainly won't be in Washington. It won't be in the Asian Development Bank. There's no other place in the world probably than in this room right now and with your colleagues that this can be accomplished. And it's not easy because basically no one's asking you. My whole theory of politics, which is not a very good theory because I'm standing here not as the president of the United States, but as a professor at a university. So obviously I'm not a very good politician. But my whole theory is that we had better get knowledge into politics urgently, and that it's not going to come from the politicians. It's not even their job. It's not their training. It's not their background. It's not their capacity, but they can listen. And what we need to do is have them listen. But to listen, they need to hear clear, understandable, practical, actionable things to do. That's hard, by the way. And interestingly, that's not what scientists are trained to do. Scientists are trained to understand. Businesses are trained to make money. Politicians are trained to hold power. No one gets this right entirely. So scientists are the only ones that know, but they're not very good at explaining or knowing how to turn the knowledge into real action. I had a very typical experience. It was a long time ago, but it made a big impression on me. One of Kenya's leading ecologists said to me, Jeff, I really, really want to meet the finance minister to explain how important the environment is and how it's being degraded in Kenya. And I said, okay, I can help arrange that. So we had the meeting, and first rule is politicians are very busy and they're not interested in theory and they don't have time and they're not interested particularly in science or anything else. And my friend, the ecologist, said, Mr. Minister, the environment's really important. And the minister said, okay, yeah, what about it? And he said, well, I just want you to know how important it is. He says, okay, yeah, well, what about it? And the ecologist went on and wasted his 20 or 30 minutes. It was disastrous because he repeated about 10 times, it's really important. But he didn't tell the finance minister one thing to do, one specific thing. What does a finance minister know? A spending line or a tax line. That's all. That's their job. Balance the books. So you have to give them a line in the budget and say, we need X 100 million rupiah for whatever. But no, this ecologist just said how important the environment was for 20 minutes. And then the meeting ended and the finance minister was bewildered, a little bit annoyed that I had wasted his 20 minutes. The ecologist had no idea what just had not happened, which is nothing. And that's how it goes on. So the scientists need to say what to do. It's not simple, the what to do. It involves, in my perspective, two things, neither of which is straightforward to do. And one of them is not really the scientist's job at all, but where we have to work together, scientists and economists and policy types. The first is the scientists should say, look, to protect this ecosystem, the following has to be done. These land areas have to be off limits for further development, or, but something clear. Draw the map. Say, look, within this boundary, that's palm oil, but the rest, no. Or whatever the answer is. And again, in the case of the Amazon, don't go beyond the 34%. Stop the deforestation. We're at the end of the line. And that has to be explained clearly. That's one thing that needs to be done. And part of that explanation is to explain, what is this ecosystem? Why is it important? What's special about it? What's treasured about it? Why is it valuable? Why is it the unique heritage of this part of the world? What is the Wallace line? Why is biodiversity on one side of the Wallace line unique compared to the other side? Why are these important ideas for the heritage of the biodiversity? That's one thing. Then the second thing is, suppose you had the map and you said, here's where the palm oil can be, and here's really where it shouldn't be anymore, for example. Or here's where the mining could be, but here's where it shouldn't be. Or please don't build a major highway through this area. Or maybe not a capital city. I don't know. I've not analyzed it. I haven't analyzed it, but it should be analyzed. It shouldn't just be, well, we're going to do it because it's politics. If it's not a good idea, it shouldn't happen. If it's a good idea, but under certain circumstances, that's a different thing. If it's a great idea, that's a third thing. From my understanding, I don't know. I've not had a rigorous briefing or explanation of the idea. All I can tell you, by the way, what I do know is that dozens of countries have moved their capital and almost nothing has worked in doing that in all of the cases I know. I'm not talking about your case, but I'm talking about countless other cases. So you have to be very careful about this. But in any event, once you know what should be done in scientific, ecological, conservation terms, then comes the question how to implement that. That's by and large not strictly a scientific question, but all of you are very experienced with the communities, with the local politicians, with the local power structures, with the farmers. And so you have answers that need to be translated into policy. The most basic idea is pay someone not to chop down the forest. That's the most basic idea, I think. That on the one hand, you draw a bright line, no more damage in this area. At least I'm simplifying, but that's one approach. But then there's a payment for the ecosystem services for protecting the forests. Now, there's one piece of good news, which is that this happens to be this year a main objective of the Brazilian government in hosting COP30. So we have actually a short period of time to put some specific financial ideas on the table. I'd love to say saving Borneo requires X billion dollars a year, and it's going to be used in the following way. some of it for monitoring, some of it for enforcement, some of it for payment to local communities so that they become stewards of the forest rather than destroyers of the forest. Honestly, I don't know what the answer is for that, because that's very local. You have to have a good feel. Is there a way that that can really work? What would work? The voluntary carbon markets, in my view, don't work. I may be wrong, but it seems to me the prices are way too low to really resist the encroachment of new plantations or mining or something else. If the value of a hectare in Borneo probably is many times larger than the price that you get in the so-called voluntary carbon market. So it's all quite unrealistic. And so turning your guidance into actual policy to money is something that really needs to be done. And I think no place has this figured out adequately. The Brazilian hosts of COP30 are trying to do that this year. They have a variety of schemes. They've had an Amazon fund. It's had some effect. It hasn't been sufficient. The idea this time is to get much, much larger sums, but directed in a credible way to accomplish what needs to be accomplished. Even though we're just starting, you're just starting the science panel for Borneo, I would like you to hurry with some practical recommendations right away, actually, based on your existing knowledge and with our discussion, so that we can go back to the Brazilians and say, here is something that absolutely needs to be on the table for delivery in November at COP30. And to do that, you know, it needs to be there this spring. It can't wait till COP30 to the Indonesia pavilion for a speech. It needs to be there now. Basically, it needs to be on the political agenda, on the G20 agenda, inside the UN processes. All those things that I said don't quite count. If we add them all together, if we aim for real money, for real policies, then something can happen. And this is, in my view, the struggle that we're in right now. The time is quite short. You'll be maybe interested to know or amused to know that the way the science panel started was a disastrous report by the Brazilian Space Agency in 2019, when it was reported that 1 month set records for forest fires, many of them deliberate, in the Amazon in the spring of 2019, because the president at the time in Brazil was a Donald Trump of Brazil, Bolsonaro, whose idea very clearly was chop down as much of the forest as fast as possible for the agro-industrial interests that brought me to power. Very straightforward. And so the Brazilian Space Agency reported, I think it was the month of April, and it was reported in May, that the forest fires set a new record. And the day after it was reported, what did the president of Brazil do? Well, obviously, he fired the head of the Brazilian Space Agency, which is, sorry to tell you, this is unfortunately how this works. I called Carlos Nobre about an hour later and asked Carlos, could you get the scientists together? And called Emma Torres, could we get the scientists of the Amazon together, because you need to get organized quickly, because this is a disaster. And that's how it started. But the idea is that's a kind of microcosm of what we're facing. And Bolsonaro is an extreme case of what we're facing. And that is intemperate political behavior that can't and doesn't want to think beyond the immediate short term. So this is the purpose of the panel. What do I want from the panel? First, I want to learn from you about Borneo. I want to read it and say, that's amazing. Wow. I really want to bring my granddaughters to look at the pictures in your report and say, look at this incredible ecosystem. And then I want to bring them to Borneo, of course, afterwards. But the first thing that I really want from the scientists is explain this unique place. And while we're talking about Borneo, we're really talking about the whole region. So this is our first use case, but we're talking about the unique ecosystems of Southeast Asia. But I want to learn from you what's special about the biodiversity, the functioning, the physical processes that dictate the hydrology, the biodiversity of the island, the flora, the fauna, why it needs to be saved. And I expect to say, oh my God, this is so beautiful, so important, so vital. And I expect your president to say the same and political leaders in this country to say the same when you've explained it clearly. So this is the first thing that is very important. What are we talking about? Why is it important? Why is it unique? Why is it beautiful? Why is it crucial to save? The second point is, what is the current risk? And the current risks are human processes and ongoing global change. So in the case of the Amazon, it's the deforestation on the ground combined with global climate change, which is another forcing that is leading to the risk of flipping the whole system to savanna from rainforest. So what's at stake in Borneo? Is it the palm oil? Is it other things? Is it the population growth? Is it new cities? Is it infrastructure? Is it all of the above? Can you quantify it? Can one describe the history of how this is happening? The pace? Are the risks accelerating? How does global change further impact these developments? This is the second part, in my view. And the third part, as I've said, is the what to do part. And the what to do part involves two things. First, as ecologists, what to do. And by that I mean what needs to be saved and how should it be saved. Show us maps. Show us where the red lines are. Show us where the no-go areas should be. Teach us what sustainable forestry really is or isn't. We don't know. I don't know. I can help you to convey the message, but I don't know. So you have to explain it to me. What should be done from an ecologist point of view? And then where I can help, because it's my expertise, is how do we turn that into money? How do we turn that into policy? How do we turn that into specific actions where the politicians say, okay, you bring that billion, you bring those 5 billion, that makes sense. See if you can do it. That, I think, is part of the challenge, because this is not going to work simply preaching conservation, by the way. It can work if we can put some counterweights to the market forces. And so that's what I really want to do. And I really want to also use the Brazilian leadership to help put something through this year. This year, when Brazil is both president of the COP and when it is president of the BRICS. And Indonesia is part of the BRICS. And it's important for the BRICS to take this on as well. So this is what I'm hoping we can do. It's kind of accelerated because this would be a great 5-year project. And it will be in some sense, but we have to front load some of the results just now based on what is known just now so that we can get real policy recommendations into the mix for 2025. So thank you very, very much for what you're doing.
Thank you very much, Professor Jeff Sach. As always, your speech is always very sharp, amazing, and insightful, as well as very clarifying now in terms of this really helpful for the science panel teams who plan to contribute on the assessment. But if I can just quickly summarize before we go into the next speaker of Professor Wing, who will explain further about the science panel. If I can just summarize to for the benefit of especially our online team. So there are a few things that Professor Jeff emphasized. First is with the preposition that the conditions of the planet, basically, that is really, really concerning. And this, unfortunately, only being understood by scientists. And this needs to be translated and communicated to the politicians and turns into policy to make it something that is implementable on the ground. And that will need basically things that as clear and practical and actionable as possible. And also, thank you for explaining that we have a very clear target that in the COP30, we're going to present this and making it as a great opportunity, and we need to develop something that is very clear in terms of the investment period. And this is exactly what we plan to have on the assessment, that we're probably going to start from there and then explain it in a way that I would call it like the wow factor about the Borneo, that we need to be able to convince the audience from our even kids, grandchild, your grandchild, all the way to the president, and make them convinced how important, how amazing it is, the biodiversity in Borneo from all aspects. And also at the same time, talking about the current risk that we are facing, not only from the action on the ground by the people, but also the global change that make the things becoming really uncontrollable. And also the last one is to make it very clear again, like the actionable things, what to do by both ecologists as well as the politician, especially the investors from all sides, whether it is government or private sectors and business and so on. Okay, so for the next speaker, we're going to have the Vice President for Southeast Asia of the SDSN, who is also the initiator of the Science Panel for Borneo, Professor Wings. The time is yours. Thank you.
Selamat pagi. Professor Daniel, President of the Indonesian Academy of Sciences, Professor Jatna Supriatna, leader of the Science Panel of Borneo. Thank you very much for arranging this meeting between the scientific community of Indonesia and SDSN. And thank you very much for making this available online so that the scientific community in Malaysia could join in as well. Well, as usual, is very gracious of Abang Indonesia to extend accessibility to the rest of the Nusantara. Honored guests and distinguished ladies and gentlemen, ibu-ibu dan bapak-bapak, we are gathered here to discuss how we can best implement our duty as scientists to help prevent the mass extinction of species. The global biosphere consists of interconnected regional biospheres. The world we see around us is the product of the interaction among three components: the biological biosphere, the biological sphere, the geological physical system, and the human community. Over time, the human community has asserted greater and greater influence on the geological system. The biggest manifestation of that is climate change that is leading to the warming of the oceans, the killing of the corals, wildfires all over the world that is causing deforestation as well as destruction of the human community. The human community's impact on the biosphere comes from farming, plantation, and mining. And that has certainly led to the founding of the three-country project, the Hearts of Borneo, by Malaysia, Brunei, and Indonesia. Our task is to talk about how do we have economic development that is consistent with environmental sustainability and consistent with the values of social justice, which is social mobility and social inclusion. And SDSN-Asia is very happy that it has managed to get the cooperation from Indonesia, Malaysia, and Brunei to form the science panel of Borneo. The 7 teams are led by Professor Jatna Supriatna and Professor Mazlin Mokhtar of Malaysia. The 7 teams are in groups like geological cluster, the indigenous community cluster, the sustainable agriculture cluster, and the economic development clusters. And these teams are drawn nationwide in each country. In the case of Indonesia, we are very lucky with the help of Bank Indonesia to galvanize Universitas Tanjung Pura, Universitas Lampung Mangkurat, Universitas Palangkaraya, Universitas Mullah Muhammad, and of course, with the leading universities on Java like UI, Gajah Mada, and Institute Pertanian Bogor. This is the first phase of the project, and as Jeff said, the emphasis right now is less to conduct original research, because all of you have not been idle. Lots is known. But now we need to engage in a translation exercise to translate it to the policy community to guide them on what is to be done. Emma will talk more about the science panel, but let me finish up by saying what the next phase after the science panel will be. Like Jeff said, this is part of a greater project, the Science Panel for Southeast Asia Biodiversity Protection. The immediate extension of this would have: 1, We have to cover Celebes, Sumatra, and Semenanjung, Malaysia, and the oceans of the archipelago. Because after all, the oceans is more than half of the surface area of the entire Nusantara. We cannot not talk about the preservation, the conservation of the maritime species. So this is the roadmap that we are engaged on, but we have an immediate task at hand, which is that we have to get our policy briefs ready by spring this year to make it in time into the discussion of COP30 in Bellum. Thank you very much for your participation today, and the Science Panel of Borneo looks forward to your continued active contributions, and please do not hesitate to reach out to Jatna, Professor Mazlin, and my humble self. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Wing, for emphasizing again how important and strategic is the role of the science panel teams, and the timeline, also the urgency of preparing these materials that we can use to translate what we understand about the biodiversity in Borneo. Our next speaker will be very special today, Professor Emma Torres, who is the Vice President for SDSN the Americas, and also the chair of the office in New York office. And she's going to share about the lesson learned from because she's also leading the science panel for leading and initiating the science panel for Amazon as well as Congo Basin. So since the science panel for Borneo is just being initiated, I think it will be going to be very helpful if we can learn the lessons that the other science panel that already been established can share today. So without further ado, Professor Emma, time is yours.
Thank you very much. It's a great honor and pleasure to be with you here. Thank you very much to the Academy of Science, Professor Daniel. Thank you so much for being our host. And of course, to our dear co-chair of the Science Panel of the Order, Professor Jatna. I'm very happy to be with you here today and share some of the experience we had with the Science Panel of the Amazon. Next, please. The panel, as Jeff said, was established in 2019. And it was important because it was a critical moment, as he very well explained, at the forest at that moment. And what was the main vision and purpose of this panel is to synthesize and communicate scientific knowledge about the Amazon, integrating with indigenous and local knowledge, and accelerating solutions. So here again, this is very important. The panel also is focusing on solutions for a sustainable and equitable development in the region. The vision is to really be a global authority that provides state-of-the-art, policy-relevant science and knowledge about the Amazon. Next, please. It's the first panel of its nature. It's the first regional scientific that encompasses the whole basin. There's been, of course, a lot of research on the Amazon at the country level in different areas, but it's the first one that really sees the basin, as a regional basin. It's composed of more than 300 scientists from around the world, but primarily from the region. 70% come from the countries, and we also have 13 indigenous scientists that are being very, very, very important in terms of the dialogue of the knowledges as they advance with the report. It has a very important strategic committee that is about leading persons of the region that are opinion makers. And this is very critical because we wanted from the very beginning that the panel engages with the broad society. We have a very strong scientific steering committee, and now we have just established a youth advisory committee, which we hope is going to be the inspiration for the next generation of scientists in the region. We have a very good MOOC, massive open online course that is based on the first report, and it's been, launched this year and last year, I'm sorry, and we already have over 6,000 scientists that are students that have signed to this amazing course. Next, please. I want to particularly emphasize the fact, being here at the Academy of Science, what is some of the key scientific impact that the first Amazon assessment report has had. It was, we really force the scientists, like Jeff was saying, they're very good at sort of synthesizing the knowledge, but it was very difficult to get them to really focus on what would be the key policy relevant recommendations for policymakers. And they came up with these 4 major ones. Number 1 was immediate moratorium on deforestation in areas approaching the tipping point. They identified exactly those areas where we're at the verge of reaching the tipping point. Second, to really do zero deforestation, degradation, and wildfires by 2030 in the entire basin. And that decision has been adopted by the countries of the region already. To restore terrestrial and aquatic ecosystems. And this is, again, an area of major investment that could take place and is taking place already in the region. And a vibrant bioeconomy that is based on healthy standing forests and flowing rivers. Is exactly what Jeff was saying. How much are we willing to pay for this standing forest and how to use this standing forest to have a sustainable bioeconomy in the region. The region is big, it's 7 million kilometers squares, is almost half of the subcontinent of South America. So it is very important that this region also provides sustainable livelihoods and sustainable development for 40 million people. So this is an area that, again, the panel is concentrated. Next, please. We had, the panel has produced a number of policy briefs, 16, I think, and now we're in the process of producing 4 more, number of statements in different forums. But I would like to highlight in particularly some of the key scientific publications that have been having a lot of impact. One is the whole issue of restoration and how to transform these areas that were called the arc of deforestation into arcs of restoration. And also what it means, a new infrastructure for the Amazon. What is a sustainable infrastructure in the Amazon context? So the scientists got together, put together a good policy brief, and we got engaged with the World Bank and their team on infrastructure to make sure that this was relevant for future investments. So I'm just highlighting 2 that I think are very critical in terms of the impact on economics and on infrastructure. Next. It has had also a tremendous impact in terms of the scientific community. Over 200 scientific articles have been informed by the science panel documents. And there are more yet to be cataloged. These are the ones that we have identified immediately, but it's a lot of scientific production, and it's being used in universities all over the region, the whole report. The report is, Jeff was terrified when he learned that it was 1,300 pages. So they also produce what we call chapters in brief. So we have, small chapters in brief of all this report. And this is being used even in educational material at universities and schools. Next, please. Again, another important scientific impact is to really, come to key concepts. The tipping point right now is something that has come very clearly, both at a scientific level. There's much more work being done, in particular in these areas that are reaching tipping points, but also the policymakers are much more aware that is a very serious risk in the region that will have tremendous impact. Is beyond the fact that it will have impact in biodiversity, it will have tremendous economic impact in the region as well. So this is a very important message that is filtrating policy making and the scientific community. Next, please. I think from the very beginning, the whole effort has been also to engage with different stakeholders, particularly policymakers. And here I'm very happy to say that, we're very fortunate that our co-chair, Carlos Nobre, is a very, known scientist, but also is a very good communicator. And we have, he's been engaged with policymakers. We have engaged the different groups of scientists with policymakers. And this has been a major effort of the engagement after the report was produced. First, with the Amazon Cooperation Treaty, which is a regional cooperation treaty of the 8 countries of the basin. They've also been engaged in the Amazon President Summit. The Amazon President Summit has taken in the declaration a number of the recommendations of the Science Panel of the Amazon. And with parliamentarians from the Amazonian countries, including, we had, for instance, a very good report jointly with the Andean Parliament, which declared an emergency situation in some key areas, particularly those that are reaching the tipping point. Next, please. And we have also engaged we are engaged, and we will continue to even further engage with the financial community. And here, for instance, as an example, this policy brief, which was Arcs of Restoration, was an input for a big fund that's being established by the National Development Bank of Brazil, BNDES, one of the largest banks in the world. And they informed this Arc of Restoration, and they created a fund for restoration, which is capitalized now and is starting with the areas that are reaching the tipping point. So this is, again, one of the immediate impacts of the panel of the Amazon. And the plan that we have for this year, in particular, is to engage with other development banks, but also with private banks, and also with the financial sector of China that is investing a lot in the region. And this is, again, a series of dialogues that we will have in terms of what is the major messages that the panel has vis-a-vis the Amazon, what are the risks, but also what are the opportunities. For instance, a big opportunity for the banks that are invested in infrastructure is to invest in sustainable infrastructure. What are the opportunities to invest in bioeconomy is another thing, or in restoration. So these are the kind of things that we engage always here. Next, please. It has had, because it's been an effort from the very beginning to have a communication to a broader audience. And we had more than 260 events in many meetings of the United Nations, multilateral meetings, regional meetings. But also we had a tremendous media attention. I mean, the Science Panel of the Amazon report is known as the Encyclopedia of the Amazon. The Guardian called it the Encyclopedia of the Amazon, and it's been used all over. And we had like over 570 media mentions that we have record of. So it has been a tremendous impact in terms also of a broader audience. And I think this is, again, an effort that we will have to do. Why the Amazon is important for the Amazon countries, but also why it's important for all the world, all of you, all of us. And I think this is a key message that we want to convey as we move to Belém and COP30. Next, please. As I mentioned, we have this whole issue of the financial sector as a major, but I think the most important thing that now we are also working on is on youth, and it's how we can mobilize the next generation of scientists, and scientists that go to the forest, science that really engage with the local communities. And this is going to be, we created a small group of young leaders, young scientist leaders that are helping us to have a whole strategy. And we are also engaging with partners. The Science Panel of the Amazon cannot train scientists, but what we'll do is get with partners that are going to be investing in training and in enhancing capacity for younger scientists. Next, please. I would like to highlight in particularly also the whole work with indigenous peoples and local communities. We're very proud that we have scientists, indigenous people scientists in the panel, but also we engage with the different groups, including because there is a lot of organizations at the regional and at the national level of indigenous people, and we have a very close dialogue with them. And we have a number of activities that we're doing together with them, including a very good policy paper on knowledge dialogues, which I think is being used for engagement with indigenous people scientists, also by other institutions. And very importantly, with the National Academy of Science, we have a number of meetings We started with the National Academy of Brazil, but we're having with individual academies of the 9 countries, of the 8 countries, and also for the Academy of Science of the Americas. And Jeff was invited to one of the dialogues that we have with the International Academy, Americas Academy of Science. And I think the whole idea here is the academies also pick up this focus on the Amazon as part of their own agenda as they move in their work. Next, please. I mentioned already the engagement with policymakers, and I like to highlight in particularly, that we are also planning a big meeting of the Amazon We Want, a high-level conference in Ecuador, precisely to prepare, the region is preparing itself for Belém, and this will be a good moment to engage with them with the next findings and assessment that the panel is doing. Next, please. We have a number of collaboration with different groups that are outside the region as well. And I think, again, they are more on the scientific level, but we would also like to be more engaged at the level of policy making. And this is something that at the level of the UN conferences or regional conference of policy making. Next, please. So, what is the ongoing work right now? As I mentioned, the big focus for the panel right now is the second assessment report that will be launched on the COP30. This second assessment report will be focused on connectivity. And connectivity will have many dimensions: scientific, obvious connectivity between the Andes and the Amazon, the rivers, the flowing rivers, but also connectivity of cultures. We have over 400 indigenous people communities in the Amazon, and some of them are very connected within the different countries. So connectivity, cultural connectivity, as well as biodiversity connectivity. What is precisely the areas? I mean, we are fortunate that about 50% of the Amazon has some form of protection, whether it's protected areas or territories, but some of them are not well connected. And this is, again, something that the report will come of what areas, how do we need to connect some of these areas, as well as the connection between the rivers and so on. And we'll continue doing the engagement strategy that I mentioned in all the fronts, particularly, with the academies of science, with youth, and the financial sector. Next, please. So in SDSN, we're very proud and very happy to have, to serve as facilitators of these 3 panels. The science panel of the Amazon is been the first. Now we are engaged with the science panel of the Congo Basin. The science panel of the Congo Basin has now over 100 scientists working, and we will have the first assessment report for Belém. And here is very interesting because the Congo Basin is the second more important basin, tropical forest. However, it's less known and less studied and researched than the Amazon. So this particular report will have 2 big objectives. Number 1, to synthesize the existing knowledge on the basin, but number 2, to identify what are the big gaps of knowledge. For instance, they don't know yet, unlike the Amazon, what is the sequestration or the sink role that the Congo plays. I mean, there are many figures, but it's not something definitive. So they will identify areas where they need to do more research. And we have a sister initiative, which is called Capacity Development Initiative for the Congo Basin, which is precisely, they will pick up some of those gaps, mobilize resources for research and for training scientists. They're inspired on a major initiative that Brazil had in the 80s, where they trained over 1,000 PhDs for the Amazon. And that's one of the reasons why so much more is known about the Amazon. So we are hoping that in the Congo, the second initiative, which is our twin initiative, will also mobilize significant amount of resources to train scientists for the Congo Basin. We will have, as you heard from Wong and Supriatna, we will have our science panel for Borneo, and we're very proud of that because I think it also will be the beginning to have the 3 tropical forests. And I think when President Lula was talking about the 3 tropical forests, again, the Guardian said, is the OPEC of the forest. Yes, probably it's going to be the OPEC of the forest. It will be a good OPEC. And but it's interesting, and I think will be wonderful to have these three reports and this when the whole attention is going to be for COP30 in the Amazon. Next, please. Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Emma Torres, for the very, very insightful sharing. And this really brings and gives the benefit for SPB, as we will no need to start from zero, right? Because there are already so much lesson learned. And what is interesting here is that it's amazing that so many impacts can actually take place and resulted from the initiative that I personally myself haven't even imagined before. For example, like the assessment is not only going to be beneficial for the people involved, but also for the policymakers. And there will be also can be scientific, a huge scientific impact, as well as financial investment being directed from this, which is really, really motivating to us. And there are actually several interesting things that maybe we can discuss later, like the involvement of indigenous scientists. This is also something that we need to start thinking. We so far we are very open at the moment when we initiate the science panel for Borneo, that we invite anyone that who are interested in contributing, especially from Kalimantan, Sabah, Sarawak, and Brunei from the region. But I think we need to reach out more based on this lesson learned, the importance of indigenous scientists. There are several other things that I think also for example, now that SPA is already moving to the second assessment, and it's going to involve like focusing on the connectivity, which is also very, very interesting. And you're talking not just only about the landscape level connectivity or river connectivity, but also cultural, which is, I think, pretty amazing thing that we can learn from. And thank you so much again for your sharing. And now I think we actually supposed to have lunch, not lunch break, I mean, coffee break, coffee and tea break. But I don't know if you don't mind, we can have the break while we have question and answer, if that's okay with you. So anyone who feel like needing to have the beverage over there or small snack, feel free to just take it from there and then bring it to your seat again. And so we can maximize our time. What do you think, Pak Yatna? Or breakfast? Okay, I think yeah, some people need direct break, so I think that's fine also. And we're gonna have like 15-minute breaks, yeah. And then Prof. Daniel maybe have something to say before he might need to leave quickly. Yeah. Oh, maybe here. Okay.
Yeah, well, I have to be rude. Sorry about that. I'll be leaving while you're having coffee, but feel free to have, the session the rest of the day and feel at home. So you're welcome to, network or whatever you want to do today. Again, it's been very great pleasure for us to host you. One point I would like also to underline, where we have Brazil mentioned BRICS, etc. The academy is also part of what we call S20, the scientific group, or what is it called? Engagement group in the G20. In 2020, we were hosting S20 here in this building. And then in 21 in India. Last year was in Brazil. Sorry, 23 in Brazil. 24, sorry. Yes, and this year we'll be in South Africa. So BRICS is linked together. Next month, we will send Jatna to Rio de Janeiro to continue discussing the S20 agenda. Pretoria, sorry, not Belling, in South Africa next month. And the theme or the agenda is related to climate change. So I think it's very timely to have BRICS, the Academy, and the SPABC linked together. So that's good to know. Thank you very much.
Well, Daniel, if you don't mind, sorry. Yeah, just before you leave, if you don't mind, if just in case there's any burning questions that somebody would like to ask while you're here, or maybe after Jeff moving. Yeah.
I just wanted to make a small suggestion for our report for this year. Originally, I thought that a good name would be, we have the BRICS, so I thought the BICS, which would be Brazil, Indonesia, Congo. But I think we have something better now, though. I think our report should be called the ABCs of tropical rainforest, because we have the Amazon, Borneo, and Congo. So I think you could really write the ABCs of this, and it would be very, very good to have that comprehensive view across all three. So Daniel, I only learned now was the author of the foundational study about the rainforest generating the hydrologic cycle, and so he and what is it? Biotic pump, and so he and Carlos Nobre are very close allies on that, which is really wonderful, and we should build on that great strengths. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Prof. Jam. I think ABC is like exactly what you recommended. Is easily understood by kids as well as president. I think so. It's perfect name. I think. So yeah, again, if you don't mind, maybe a few minutes just in case there's any burning questions. Anyone would like to ask something? Oh, okay. Rudy.
Go ahead with coffee. My name is Fahrudin Mangunjaya. Call me Rudy. I'm Dean of Faculty of Biology and Agriculture at National University. Our university was not on the list mentioned, but however, our alumni is Professor Jatna. Just to quite promote a little bit. I just in touch with the Professor Daniel Modiarso presentation. How is enough is enough. What will be the numbers? Numbers on ecosystem we have to protect, and what the Brazil, the Amazon teams experience, the DPR doesn't understand, and also maybe the leader of this country. So how much is enough? So how sufficient is the herd of Borneo should be protected? Thank you.
Okay, so I think from the linguistic point of view, this phrase, from the linguistic point of view, it's a bit unfortunate that this phrase is not our culture to say when enough is enough. It's like an angry man or woman to say, right? But what it's really meant when we look at the dictionary, when enough is something like, I realize that there is a point when to stop. Okay. And okay, right. When you try to communicate this idiom with politician, I think you have to be polite, right? The message that we scientifically can say, but in different way, in saying is that extensification or extension of plantation is not the answer. You will create more problem than solution. But how to intensify the existing one, I think we will have the answer. And we are challenged to give the answer that the productivity, the issue of conflicts and things like that can be resolved. Without expanding the size of plantation with more and more damage that will be caused. I don't have the number, I'm sorry, but the idea is that we have to stop somewhere. Okay.
Thank you very much, Prof. Ben. Oops, sorry. Okay, yeah, I think I don't want to hold you from the break, so maybe it's the time for us to have the break and enjoy coffee and tea, and also continue talking, discussing directly with anyone you would like to talk to. Thank you. Enjoy. Oh, foto bersama. Oh, iya sebenarnya. Oh, siapa aja? Semua. Eh, kita akan foto bersama untuk semua, mumpung masih lengkap ke ada usulan baru. Di sini bagus juga, Pak, mungkin. Siapa ya fotografernya? Mas, bisa ya? Oke, mungkin ada yang di atas juga supaya terkelihatan. Ya, semua peserta silakan. Yang online juga kalau mau dibuka. We're going to start again momentarily. So if you can go back to your seat and finishing your snack or bring it to your seat, feel free. So for the next session, we're going to change a little bit from what was written because there's, I think, a good suggestion that we should have more discussion. Yeah, with our speakers. Okay. For the next session, I would like to invite our speakers, Prof. Jeff. Yep. Misalkan dengan sengaja akhir. Semua semua satu tim. Tapi profil ya udah sengaja berpak fokus ke project untuk nanti. Ya. Ini project kenapa? Professor Jeff, Professor Wing, if you don't mind, can you come back and sit in this front, please, Professor Wing and Professor Emma as well. Yes. Yeah, because 20 minutes, they asking questions. Hello, hello. Halo. Bapak Ibu sekalian, tolong. Okay, we have an opportunity to any answer a question and answer for 20 minutes. So I see that Laude going to ask something. Anybody would like to have a very short time, so only 20 minutes to answer that, but it's really the precious time. Ya, silakan Pak.
Terima kasih Pak Jatna. Thank you very much for the Academy for inviting Pak Jeff actually to talk with us. I have one or two questions. Not question actually, but just number one, as you say that it's depend on us if we want to save Borneo, Papua. Independence, Indonesia, find this ever. We've been saying it many, many times. The government mostly they don't listen. That's why we need a singer like you to say it to the president or to the minister. Because otherwise, all of us actually a local singer. They don't like it. That's number one. Number two, the new ideas of the ministers to expand to take 20 million hectares of forest for another food estate. It is very bad ideas. So if you meet the presidents or relevant minister, please tell him. And I think Pak Daniel, it is already said before. Number three, there is a lot of investments on mining, especially on nickel, and all of them actually mostly in a small islands. According to the Indonesian law, mining small island is actually prohibited, but it is actually rampant all over. So that's why if you meet relevant ministers, please become our singers. Thank you very much.
Okay. Any others? Question?
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm Yan Sopelwakan from University of Indonesia with Pak Jatna. I will make 3 points. First, I think we will have to transform this sort of issues from the slow onset disasters kind of approach, rather than we are being dramatic by losing so much biodiversity, mass extinction, and so on. But then we are now in the escalating emergency situations. I think this one view that we have to raise the issues about especially also in Borneo. And second is that we are dealing with the kind of science of so-called. First, for example, most of these people, the politicians and so on, are suffering from the backyard syndrome or something like that. So I think we'll have to put that up. And by having that, there's a kind of publication or book written by, I forgot the 5 behavior of flirting with disasters. One is, of course, you have mentioned it about that. We don't know about risk. So then we have to monetize the risk, not only identifying what risk will be in the future, but also monetizing the risk. So then I think that's first thing. And second is that there are only small signs or indicators. The small is that they start out, what do they call it, shift the decision for considerations. The last one is that and then the disaster happens. So these are relatively the first thing is disaster. So at the end of our analysis and so on, scientific analysis has to be images into this sort of point of view that we are dealing with escalating disasters or escalating emergency situation. So I would like to give an example of how Kalimantan, for example, have suffered from months of floodings. Yes, this never happens because it's simply because of the land states and so on and so on. And this implication that the frequency as compensated for flooding is increasing, for example. But this scientific evidence is discarded because of that kind of 5 flooding disasters. And my last point is that we cannot only see it only with Borneo because Borneo is different because it's 3 times continents. So
For example, those mountains of floods in Kalimantan is sometimes so substantial because of the events of time. So I think we have to consider about the ocean both at least, not only of the island of Kalimantan itself, but also we have to understand the dynamic of the ocean, how the interpolated and implications and so on. So I think these are the my key points which I'm going to honest. Thank you so much. Thank you. My name is Professor Adu. I am from Indonesia, similar to Professor Jatna and our colleague, Mr. Professor Yat. I just want to share to you, we have experiences staying kind actually, this is the last months we have commemorate 20 years, 30 months we stop okay areas. We said to them, okay, you are thanks to the world. You are just sharing our experience. But you have to know this is based on your experience. And so that after here, for the next deadline, not how thanks to the world, but how actually share to the world. I mean, experience. Experiences means science. So I think this is me here our experience series, right? However, many of scientists not only had scientists like us, I'm geologists, but another one, social scientists and humanities, political scientists, and something. We done experiences, how we collaborate with Germany, not experiences, with the tsunami itself, like Greenland or the and something. But can collaborate with us. Why? Because the earth scientist is very, very strong. Right. What we call gravity, acceleration something from the laboratory. So they confess this on the words. Basically, this is quite special. And then, after the tsunami, 26th of December, they want to convince not only scientists, but other legislators, politicians, and also prime minister. And they decided and they placed in February to collaborate with us. Not, let's say, the Japanese or the American. I think this is we have to learn how we, one world, collaborate with each other. Thank you very much.
I wanted to ask a question. When the government has announced these millions of hectares of expansion, have they identified where this is supposed to happen? Which parts of the country? And has somebody, is there any requirement of an environmental assessment of a policy like that?
We don't know yet actually about the 20 million where actually going to be, but I think, of course, still in natural forest. In Papua, left a little bit but I think mostly in Papua, because Java it is actually impossible to build anymore, or like Sumatra maybe a little bit, but Sulawesi where I come from, it is also small. Maybe I think most of them will be focusing a little bit in Borneo or maybe somewhere in. But we have former Vice Minister of of Environment and Forestry here. So, yeah, he may actually give you some perspective about that. But this is just new. Just in a few weeks ago, he said that they are going to reserve another 20 million hectare for food. Yeah, development. Yeah.
And can you say something about the mining? Because the world's hunger for nickel is very, very, very high.
Yes.
So is there any way or any places where this makes sense and some places where it doesn't make sense? In other words,
Yes.
say nickel in this place that makes sense. But nickel in this place, that's a disaster.
Yes. Number one, when I was a commissioner of corruption education commissions, there is a governor giving a license, taking a bribe to a small island. I sent him to jail for 20 years, but now he's actually free after they cut all of his actually sentences. So this is actually for small island, less than 2 million hectares. It is the law said, no, you cannot. It is no-go zone. However, there is also small island, it's called Kabayana and in Southeast Sulawesi. It is very, very bad. Another one in the Maluku Islands, where all the nickels actually are. It is again, maybe you can mine it, but the way they're doing it, there is no environmentals and even human rights safeguard on that. Even the PhD thesis of the ministers of energy and mining, it is said so. The safeguard for the environment and human rights is neglected. So I think it is important for like people who made food and everything, they have to question the source of this tin and nickels and many others. One more, sorry to make you confused. There is now a big investigation of corruptions in tin mining in small island in Bangka, in Sumatra. So those are the government aspect of it. It is always problematic. Number three, most investors actually came from China. I want to say it, they came from China and they do not have very clear environments and human rights safeguard compared to like company from Europe, from Canada even, or even US, because you have that some kind of standards. But China, no.
I think it's interesting and important that ASEAN this year, hosted by Malaysia, will have a summit in the spring, including, that ASEAN, hosted by the Malaysian presidency, will have an ASEAN meeting with China, with Chinese government this spring. And this should be on the agenda. The idea that Chinese investment and trade relations should be based on sustainability and environmentally sound criteria and monitoring. Because I think that it's possible to get a high-level agreement with the leadership of China on this point. Our experience is lots of Chinese companies don't abide by any environmental standard at all. We had that experience in a lot of our work in Africa over the years. But if the Chinese government in the leadership takes responsibility, they can help to police the actions of their enterprises. And I do think that this is an important way to go, because at the high levels of the Chinese government, there is a commitment to sustainable development. In the business sector, not very much among many businesses. And I want to help to bridge that gap or correct that gap, because there's very little enforcement, monitoring, policing. But China has a responsibility to do that. And I think would have a willingness to take that on, but it has to be raised by both sides. And I think ASEAN as a group of leaders can raise that with China, that of course ASEAN wants investments from China, but there need to be standards and responsibility by the Chinese companies on environmental accountability. And that this needs to be put in place. So
But this is another problem because the previous governments just created a law because in the past our Environmental Management Act required every big project require environmental impact assessments.
Yeah.
They just created a law, omnibus law and presidential decree, then all national strategic project, once you actually include it or classify it as national strategic project, then you don't need environmental impact assessment. What you need actually just, they call it risk assessment, which is very, very different. So that's why in order to attract investment from outside, the Indonesian governments actually, they make it easier for the, this is unacceptable. But that's why we need a singer like you, because us, they don't listen. Thank you.
I do think the idea is you need to explain what's important. We need to help you amplify that message. That's really the idea.
Sorry, I got a quote, but Prof. Jeff will need to leave very soon. So yeah, maybe last question, last answer that you can give for today.
But clearly, also on the observation that here we're talking about a maritime continent, which is quite different. There is no attempt or desire to apply one cookie cutter or one blueprint for very different ecosystems. And that's why it's so important that you categorize, identify, explain, prioritize from the point of view of the realities here, what needs to be emphasized. This is crucial. That's why I keep saying only you can do that part, which is explaining your context. What the international side can do is to mobilize some resources, some finance, some attention, some shared learning across the different regions. But you've got to be in the lead of saying, in this place, these are the ways to understand the priorities.
Okay, boleh ya, Pak? Ya. Thank you very much. I'm not touched about the 20 million hectares plan, but for myself, I don't understand at all about that. The plan of this 20 million hectares for energy and food. But I do believe we need to, provide critics and suggestion to the government to reconsider about this huge conversion of this 20 million hectare forest. The most important I think here, I don't agree with Laude, so we just need a single singer, that is you, but we need to create more singers, in order to convince the government to do in the right way of policy and so on. And I agree with your previous proposition, Chad, that how we can create these policymakers, including parliament members, to be a good listener, right? The one problem of the scientists, actually, this is our habit, but sometimes, we create something simple into complicated things. In the scientific statement, right, or scientific narratives, right? The most important to me is how we can create the scientific information and findings and on into more simple, so that more easier for these policymakers and the parliament members to understand, to get attraction from them. So this is our big task for me and for us through this
panels for Borneo, for example, how we can create this so that easier for them to discern the scientific information to understand. And we need to sing all this kind of scientific finding with simple media, with simple meeting and so on to get attraction to continuously feed into these policymakers and parliament members in order to get attention and to implement what we are doing through this panel. So again, of course, we need Prof. Jad as an international singer, but we still also need local singers. Together, we work together. Yeah, I think that's my suggestion. Thank you.
Let me just let me just say from my experience in dealing with the policy side, you need not only a straightforward explanation, but also a clear message of what to do. Because it's not enough to say this is endangered or we can't do more of this. It's what to do. And this is very important in the climate side, which we're way behind on, for example, on the energy transformation. One breakthrough, but it's not totally effective yet, but one breakthrough was to say decarbonize the energy system by mid-century, for example. We know that Indonesia is not quite committed to that different countries have different targets. But at least there is now a bit of an understanding, what should we do? We need to have zero carbon energy. We need to electrify vehicles. We need a few items on our agenda. For the part that we're talking about here, I want you to come up with some clear guidelines, not only that something's important or at risk, but here is where and how to save it. To say, based on our science, do not add more hectares in this place, or do not mine in this way. By the way, if you could say, I don't know if it's possible, but if you could say, nickel mining can be sustainable, but it must be in the following way. Boy, that is so much better than telling them it can't be done. But if you can tell them how they can do it, they'll love you for that. So, in other words, coming up with a practical, clear message, not only of what's important, but how to do it. Because in economics, there was a saying by Paul Samuelson, who was the great economist of the United States when I was a student. And he had a slogan, which was, if you want to convince another economist of something, give them a half-finished theorem. And the idea was they'll work on the other half, and then they'll believe it. My experience with politics is quite different. If you want to convince them of something, give them a fully finished theorem. They don't want to finish the other half of the theorem. They don't want to have to figure out what to do. They want you to tell them what to do in a way that is acceptable. So if you tell them we should not mine nickel here, they'll say, oh, I can't even hear you. If you tell them, you could actually mine nickel, but not in these open pit areas, not with this massive destruction, not with this technology, and not in these places, but in this place and this place using this method, then they can hear you. So something practical is so valuable in making public policy. This is what my suggestion would be.
I just wanted to mention also that
Emma's going to stay, but we're going to have to leave for another meeting. So thank you to everybody, and we will work quickly and diligently and actually make a big success this year. And I'll do as much good singing as I can do. But you have to provide the lyrics. Otherwise I'm just gonna hum, you know. So you have to give the words. Thank you. Thanks. Harus beres-beres. Nanti saya akan bisa setelah. Yes. Terima kasih. Terima kasih.
Okay, if I may, I just wanted to report. Hello? This is working. Hello? Yeah. If I may, I just want to make one comment. The Brazil government has launched a major initiative, which is the establishment of a fund, which is called Tropical Forest Forever Facility. And the target is to mobilize in the short term $25 billion, but continue increasing, and to formally establish it by Belén. And the idea here is to really support countries that are going to conserve forests. And there will be two elements. It will be what is the land that they're going to conserve, and there will be a monitoring system. But it will be for all the services. So they will not be just carbon or biodiversity, but hectares. How many hectares? What are the hectares? What is the quality of the hectares and the monitoring? I think that initiative could be something that be very, very good also to incentivize the government for conservation, but also to the communities that are in those areas, because they will be compensated for that. So this is something that, as I said, is being launched, is being negotiated, it's already being accepted at the level of the G20, and I'm sure it's going to be progressing as we move to Belén.
Yeah. So, Bapak Ibu, since Torres has experience in developing this Amazon now is a Congo, so what step we have to be taken is very important. So this is we still have time to discuss and progress anything that we have a cluster, Profian, Pak Edwin, Pak Dedi, and many others. So maybe we can really this opportunity, if you want to ask Emma, opportunity, the difficulty, a challenge, and also on. Also, don't forget the finance. So I would like to, ask Emma maybe how that really she start and how that the money coming from and flow from the government, from NGO, from how they raise the money to get this science panel and so on and so on. So anybody want to raise question and something, please? Yeah, sure.
Pakai bahasa Indonesia dulu nggak apa-apa ya. Seberapa jauh di Amazon kesuksesan untuk melibatkan indigenous people untuk menjaga hutan?
I cannot hear you very well.
eh, sebutlah diduduki ya, ditempati oleh suku Dayak. Nah, artinya suku Dayak artinya punya peran penting ya untuk diajak kerjasama untuk menjaga hutan dan setahu saya juga suku Dayak itu punya filosofi tentang eh,
Um, as I mentioned earlier, the focus has been to really pick up some of the key policy relevant recommendations of this massive report. The massive report was an assessment, but they managed to distill in some fewer policy relevant recommendations. And like Professor Sachs was saying, really go to the policy makers with some very concrete things. For instance, there is the danger of reaching a tipping point. Where is the tipping point taking place? What should be done in those areas where they're reaching the tipping point? One major recommendation was to really move very fast with a moratorium of deforestation in those particular areas, immediate, and then restoration. And that's been picked up. As I mentioned, there is already a fund being created for restoration. So this is the way the panel has moved. Second, for instance, is the issue of infrastructure. Infrastructure in the Amazon is being very destructive. And at the moment there is something built, there's much more people move into the forest. So now they came up with a very good paper, policy brief. What can you do? What is sustainable infrastructure in the Amazon? So they came with a lot of sort of solutions. And we were very fortunate that the World Bank put the infrastructure team also to work with them because it's really something that is relevant in the moment you're taking decisions for infrastructure.
Okay, the next comment or question. So my name is Marcel Alveri Adis, and I represent the freshwater fish of Indonesia.
we started a whole brainstorming about how to structure the report. And then there were lead authors for different sections. And they met periodically, first of all with their own groups, but also, as the lead authors made among themselves, so that to create a coherent narrative of the report. At the beginning was a struggle, but then it really worked out now. And we use the model that the panel of the Amazon developed, for getting the coherence you're talking about, for the Congo Basin, and it's working. And I think the key thing is from the very beginning, at least, to start identifying what are the key significant areas that they should focus on the assessment. And then identify the key leading scientists on those areas that serve as lead authors, and then they call more contributing authors and so on. So that's the way it works.
Yeah, probably if, we can learn more from SPA with the process, then and then I'd like to engage more in terms of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mas Monty. Okay, more question, yeah? Okay.
I'm Sugarjito from National University. Just, I would like to ask you, how convince you that this initiative can bring money to this country, like Indonesia, Congo, and Brazil? Because our problem is always, many kind of this initiative, states, biodiversity convention, and then climate. We never satisfy with the money come to us. That's why we we always lose with the competitor, like that guy who destruct the forest and ecosystem. This is the most important for us because we are running to compete with money that can help us.
Yeah.
Because we protect habitat, but if no money, then it means we swim or we will die in the old, in the cold, ocean, the cold forest. But we can die because no money to compete with this kind of business. Thank you.
Thank you. I think this is a challenge, obviously. And one of the key things that in the case, the Amazon, I want to clarify that it's not only Brazil. This is 8 countries. 8 countries and a national territory, which is the French Guiana. So it is also a regional approach to the management of the Amazon. But the key important thing is, and all the scientists have the same complaint, that there's no enough investment on science, on innovation, what is really needed to ultimately conserve the Amazon. Brazil made a major effort in the 80s, and they had an agreement, the Ministry of Science and Technology of Brazil, together with NASA, to train scientists that could understand, because the Amazon was not so well known, so well understood. And there were 1,000 PhDs were trained, and that revolutionized the knowledge of the Amazon, because there were these 1,000 of PhDs that they were also professors and so on, that they train more people. And that's why the Amazon, in a way, is a lot more to be known, but is more known that, for instance, like I was saying in the case of Congo. What is interesting right now is that there are a number, and this is the engagement with the financial sector. It's important that the financial sector sees that it's very important to understand these ecosystems, because they're only to understand the risks when they're doing investment, but also the opportunities. And I think, and in that sense, that they could invest on science, on technology. Multilateral development banks are getting more interested as well into investing on these things. The Global Environment Facility is investing more on these 3 tropical forests as well. So I think there is an awareness, and the key thing from the scientist community is to really put together projects that could convince that there is a need to investment on this region. And like I was mentioning, this tropical forest forever facility that Brazil is promoting, one of the elements will be precisely to that, to compensate for conservation, but to invest on science and knowledge as well.
I think that's the first ideas about how do we get funding for this project. I think this is really important. That's why the project itself is not only SPB as standalone. It's just like the collaboration between SPA, SPB, and SPC. So that's really what Emma is talking about. The ideas in the future, I think, is that, of course, we really need funding for that. But I think we trying really hard to get that one with the help of Jeff and Professor Wu and many others. We're going to try really hard to make things happen. But that's really good that we have the target. Target that in November 2025, we're going to have presenting our ideas, our paper, our assessment. I like the Brazilian, they call the Amazonian assessment. So I think what we need is really assessment. As we know that the ecology of Kalimantan already written by Katie McKinnon in 2000, that was like 25 years ago. So how do we revisit it again? That really the ecology of Kalimantan, because that was really written really well, but of course that's out of date. I think that's really need to be assessed again. With the help of you all guys, I think that we can help on, target in June, as I think mentioned by Jeff, that we really need to have at least, what assessment need, and then what that really the funding needs, and so on and so on. Because this project is not only a year, I think it's going to be continue as he mentioned about that may be the future, because of course there's so many problematic challenges, opportunity at the same time for the Borneo project. I think it is important that we are right now understand what the cluster is going to be. I think last time we already discussed about the cluster. We have Aludohong, who is, they call the indigenous scientist from Borneo. We have Ardi, who is indigenous scientist from Borneo too. So I think we have so many from Borneo. I think we have in Pagusti also, and we have many others. I think we can work together, between the scientists who are here from around Jakarta, and also in the 6 university in Kalimantan that will be, I think within a few months, Pak Alu is going to have a meeting in Central Kalimantan. So I think we're going to lay down the whole project until November. That's really, and how do we work together? And do we assess? How do we the championing all this the subject of the Kalimantan's biodiversity, Kalimantan forest, water as mentioned by Marcel, and many others. Anything after that?
There is no more comment. I think we can move on to the next session.
Okay.
Update of the progress of
Okay.
SPB from both sides, from you, from the Kalimantan side, and I think there is also Prof.
From Malaysia, Pak Mazlin is there?
Mazlin available online?
Is Pak Mazlin online? Okay, thank you.
If not, maybe we can start from Pak Yatna while waiting.
Okay, I can start with. Bisa itu presentasi. Baik, Bapak Ibu sekalian, I think what I would like to this science panel for Borneo. So the idea is really how do we get this into the calendar? But at least what we have here is detailed insight into the current biodiversity. So we need to have what is main threat and what proposed solution. And then we also would like to case studies and success story about biodiversity conservation and sustainable development. We would like to also to prominent scientists, diverse background, interact the policymaker and many others. I think this is already mentioned before. And how do we get into the SDG? I understand that every single cluster will have to attach to what the solution, the SDGs. And then I think the SPB also going to have either formal and non-formal networking within the members. And of course, how do we disseminate it, scientific knowledge, and so on, into the government or policymakers. I think we discussed with Jeff about that. The next slide. So as I mentioned here is the ecology of part Kalimantan, Indonesia and Borneo is already 25 years. So we really need to revise this because this is like the most complete the understanding about the Borneo, Indonesia and Borneo. Next slide. So here's the cluster, ladies and gentlemen, Bapak Ibu. So we have geology and geography. We have fauna and flora. We have sustainable agriculture. We have water and mineral resources. And we have social well-being and cultural diversity. So in this cluster, each cluster, I think Bapak Ibu, you can list it yourself because there is going to be Pak Narto has WA group, WhatsApp group. So then within that, you can really put in the WhatsApp group. And this time will be, even for example, for fauna, wildlife, and protection, there is also section of the fauna. For example, there's freshwater fish, birds and reptiles and so on and so on. So I think the good thing that Prof. Azlan from Malaysia and myself is in the group of fauna. So Malaysia and Brunei is headed by Prof. Azlan. Geology and geography, Profian. He's the chair of that the group. So I think this is really important. Also in Malaysian side, I forget Prof. Baba, yeah. Prof. Baba from Malaysia side. For flora, we have Prof. Dedi Darnaidi. Where's Prof. Dedi Darnaidi? And I think it's going to be also with members. For sustainable agriculture, we still have, we still don't have the chair yet. We have Professor Yun in Malaysia, and we need somebody else from Indonesia. From social well-being and cultural diversity, we're going to have Bapak Aludohong, and also from Malaysia side, we still don't have any. I think maybe Prof. Mazlan will inform us. So we can have more if you want to think about communication, right? About any others related issue, for example. So please let us know about what really need to be done. Next slide. This is what we have right now. For example, the deforestation in Indonesia, Borneo. As you can see that this is the last 2020. So we need information more. For example, the highest, for example, right now is South Kalimantan, Pak Andri. The highest deforestation rate in up to 2020 is about 69% compared to 2000. So the last 20 years, there's so much deforested areas. And also the West Kalimantan, and also the East Kalimantan, right? So I think that's really the important knowledge and assessment. This is the kind of assessment we are going to do. Next slide. This is what we did for Borneo primate, for example. We already have the species number, the location, the diversity, habitat, and also about the deforestation in the area, for example. The next slide. Here is the loss percentage of each habitat loss of each species. So this is really an example, right? So I think we can do it for the bird, for the many other species in Borneo. Next slide. Well, this is really important, as mentioned, that the Nusantara is the challenge or opportunity. Whether that's going to be assessment or not, Nusantara or not. Next slide. Here is the challenge and the opportunity of the Bornean new development in Indonesia. For example, the communities of pulp and paper, coal minings, community sawit, food estates, migration and conflict, forest and logging. But at the same time, there is also opportunities. For example, how do we still keep the moratoriums? How do we rehabilitation, restoration happening? How do we get the carbon trade, for example? That's really the opportunity. Although, as Jeff said, that Jeff is not believe on that the carbon trade, especially on that. Also, how this if the new government plan for Nusantara, but also the new law for conservation, for example, the new law on and so on and so on. So this is really what the assessment will need to be. We also has the national parks and 8 protected areas bigger than 25,000 hectares. That's really the assessment we needed to be done. Next slide. So here is the green and blue economy new frontier for ecosystem services. How this really the CTI Coral Triangle Initiative and also the Heart of Borneo reviving. Saya kira itu I think that's really the just minute. So Bapak Ibu sekalian, I think that's the only thing that we have to do. But that's really part of the flora fauna. So we still have needed for the culture. How many diets and land tenure and so on and so on. Plus, it's okay if there's overlapping between one cluster with the other cluster. But the most important thing, we have to have a timeline when it's going to be. For the fauna, Pak Narto and I and the team is already have the WhatsApp group here that really including in the fish, reptiles, birds, mammals, and so on and so on. So that's really important to have it. But for the other, I think it's really need for Prof. Yan and Pa Edwin for the minerals. It's also important to have how that really we are lay down the timelines and to see how at least maybe we have now it's January. I think we have to be prudent about when is going to assess and how long and how do we facilitate this. For example, what we need, whether that because we now is established database here, database for several because some of those are already ready database from the Green, this guy from Green here. So we can work with Green and we can work with many other university who has database, either local university or central national university in Jakarta. Next slide. Finish it. Okay. Bapak Ibu sekalian, I think that's really the progress. Let me ask Pak Mazlin. Pak Mazlin is there? Nggak ada. Oh,
I already chatted also personally, but no response. So I assume there might be connection problem or something.
okay.
So maybe we can update with him next time.
All right.
And now if I can suggest, Pak, maybe since there are also cluster leader, if there is any comment or update, maybe we can ask. And yeah, after this, like the
Pak Yan, do you
closing and next
address
step.
something?
There is a question also. Oh,
Di depan Pak Yan seperti
yeah. Thank you very much. I'm Yan Supriatna from UI. Working with few people who update and collect about the geology and geography. And actually, we have let me see. Yeah, actually, we would not limit geology and geography only within the domain of the geology and geography, but actually we would also like to connect or assimilate and see overlapping and issues with the other, for example, the 5 or 6 clusters. For example, the way we approach the see how geology and geography contributes to the issues of the other clusters. For example, how can we for example, the fauna and flora, and also the other issues of, for example, minerals and waters, by starting or seeing or looking at how actually the land use changes has already been observed. So from there, even maybe we go backward, would like to see how the insights from the economy and, for example, trading perspective, and actually how this drives the land use change in Borneo, for example. So by having that, we have a common platform to see how actually very specific drivers contribute to the common issues of the land use change, for example. And from there, I focus more on deforestations and so on, which I think I have already shown also maybe in the morning. So, and from there, we see how actually geology and geography really what is it called, can contribute and give the baseline, for example, for seeing future fate of Borneo, for example, by integrating also, for example, climate change, and not to forget also, we would like to have the baseline of how the paleoclimate is actually contributing to see before we really have this sort of issues of blue economy and green economy, so on. So from there, then we would like, as I mentioned before, to really focus or have the common what do we call language or understanding from the disaster point of view. So from there, all this for fauna, economy, and so on, then we should have really kind of common perception how we assimilate and compose that in terms of these escalating emergency situations. Because then by having that, we transform the risk, by using by monetizing it, by putting by using, for example, the scientific modeling and future complex modeling. And from there, we can say this will be the future fate of Borneo, and this will be the future fate of Indonesia and the region, as far as we are concerned. So from there, then we come up with the common integrated and assimilated policy recommendations, by putting forward the sustainable and resilience development. So I think we cannot and what do you call it? We cannot just limit, our descriptions only, but yes, of course, we need it. So then, by having not only limiting ourselves on descriptive approach into a predictive approach, this is, I think, what is important to have this our common work. I think, Jatna, that's more or less my perspective. Thank you.
Thank you. David?
Maybe while waiting,
I have a little bit of a practical question. I think I'll try and break the question down. So as a contributor to this assessment, I just wanted to know, and I think it might be relevant for other researchers and contributors to the assessment. How would we contribute? Because a lot of our research is either area specific or it probably is a multi-dimensional approach. So it would be covering different chapters of this assessment. So how can we contribute to this as a contributor? Like in what sense or in what format should be contributed? Is it just in terms of data? Is it in terms of um, a written summary of our research in that area? And then how do we then approach each of these different topics within this massive assessment if it is a multi-dimensional approach in terms of research? I think it's more like how to go about it as a contributor from now. And so then we can, at least from our end, we can get the ball rolling as well from all the researchers contributing.
Okay, maybe I can start addressing that because based on the experience from at least the fauna cluster, even more specifically for fauna Kalimantan. So here, like the overall process itself has been quite dynamic. Because we basically start from scratch, right? And we don't know the pattern and everything, but we've been developing this draft outline with also kind of like extended outline. We call it sometimes synopsis, basically the general idea, the goals and everything. And then we split into several, sub chapters, and then even like sub chapters. And after that, because that was developed by a few people, like we call it kind of like core team. And then from there, we actually invite people who can actually possibly contribute to all of those. And then from one person, they actually also recommend further and so on. So that has been the approach, and so far it's been working. But for sure that there's still going to be a long way. Yeah, but now the mode of work has been every kind of like chapter or sub chapters. They're going to develop further detailing on the content as well as the timeline. So yeah, I think the timeline will need to be established at multi-level. Yeah, at the SPB itself, we already have quite a clear idea when we need to finalize the assessment. And then because we break it down into Kalimantan, and then assuming that similar processes happening in Sabah, Sarawak, and Brunei, then we need to once the Kalimantan is ready, the kind of like sub-site level is ready, then we're going to write more overarching articles to kind of like combine and stitch the general issues and so on. So yeah, that's kind of like the process. But we can discuss more also in more detail within this fauna or sub chapters like specific what's it called, taxa, for example. Yeah, we can discuss together. That's okay. Payana, maybe you have more. Yeah.
No, I think it's really it's in the early stage because we just launched last November, so it's only 1 month and a half. But this is important. We're going to start in each cluster first, right? And then we're going to look at the data, whether data is available or not, because the gaps is very important. When we look at the book of ecology of Kalimantan, there are so many gaps too. I think that's really need to be done. So I think this is the beginning of. That's why when we invite Prof. Shah here, is just to boost that this is going to happen. It's not just we talked, but this is really after Baku November, it's just December, and then we start. Even only 1 month, we still have so many things that's already done. So I think this really, Pak Dedi want to elaborate things about flora? Or?
Thank you, Pak Jatna. I think when trying to coordinating the cluster of flora. We are thinking to have few chapters. The first is at the species level, where there's the advantage of the Borneo, and but still continue into the endangered species of the Borneo. And the second is from the ecosystem level. There are so many kind of ecosystem already in the national park, but there's some other outside of the national park, but very important ecosystem. And the third is the advantage of what have we done. Look like for the species is there are so many endangered species, but the strategy for establishing the global botanic garden, that is the success story about flora. But again, linked to the other of others, ecosystem services and ecosystem destroy, look like deforestation and competition at the plantation. And the last is the most important is the traditional knowledge of the people. I think the flora is getting around there. We are not thinking to have new research, but compiling not only for the real publication, but there are so many secondary publications not well published, that look like report, and that is important also to compile. I think then we need then for the technically is I'm thinking to have how to really communicate with our neighbor Malaysia in much more stable, much more much more fixed schedule because November is relatively very short. But I think Professor Charlie is here, and July is we have the Flora Malaysiana Symposium in Papua.
Yeah.
That is very much relevant for us as the Flora cluster. To thinking about how to link the progress of the Flora cluster in Borneo and bring it up a promoting in the Flora Malaysiana in Papua. So I think Professor Charlie knows it very well. But we have to do something, such kind of the promoting what we have done to cluster, in particular like the Flora. I think I know that the taxonomic group of the Flora Malaysia is that a lot of things have to be done. But anyway, to see the gap and the relation. Thank you, Jatna.
Thank you, Pak Didi. Charlie, do you want to add for Malaysiana?
Thank you, Pak Yatna. Yeah, I just want to add some information, progress about Flora Malaysiana Symposium and also Nature-Based Climate Solution Conference in Manokwari. So this both conference will be conducted back to back on 21st and 26th July 2025. And then, yes, of course, we would like to invite all botanists, plant taxonomists, ecologists, but also climate scientists, policymakers, practitioners, especially related with sustainable developments. We would like to emphasize the scientific results should be in line with the policy decision makers. So I think that will be important. And we just discussed about how to establish the similar science panel for New Guinea. of Papua. So we hope we will be have a meeting on the conference, on the meetings, and yeah, of course, will be a good exercise before we go to COP 30 in Brazil. Yeah, I, I also want to mention that we are very active on GHF Government Climate and Forest Task Force. So this is a subnational organization working on how to conserve forests, but also we think about how to increase the prosperity of people, especially with local or indigenous peoples. So this is will be uh, working back to back between scientific work, but also with traditional communities and also with the policymakers. Yeah. Thank you, Bajar.
Thank you.
Yeah, can I just have a quick comment, Pak? Yeah, really interesting information, Prof. Charlie, actually, that, by the way, yeah, there is a new group separate from this, but IUCN Indonesia Species Specialist Group that I would like to mention, Pak. And there is a flora also there under the a different group. It's called Indonesian Plant Red List Authority. That I believe they already informed also about this very great plan that you have. But in case it has not, if you have more information about that, I would be happy to help sharing it with them. Yeah. Thank you. Wow. Vishnu.
Thank you, Mas Narto. Prof, we have a receipt of the invitation last year for the initiation for the panel, and then probably we have two times of discussions until now, and then yeah, probably based on Pak Dedi said the same. So with about the how to accelerate there, because we need probably we need to make the step by step walking in accelerating until the November. I think this is important for this. So how to make for the step by step walking for this. And then second, opportunity, Mr. Prof. Mazlin is not attend here. We have a team from the Sabah Wildlife Survey, so that we are recommended if Sabah Wildlife is also join with the panel, because we have a team, for example, for the I'm working for the elephant conservation, and then also we involve them in Sabah and also in the North Kalimantan, so that probably it will be they are join with us. I think so. Thanks.
Thank you, Mike. Any other question or comment? Edwin, you want to? Okay, so the future leaders for social well-being is Alu Bohong. Do you have any ideas or something?
Thank you, Prof. Charlie. You know that I'm in this position. Well, thanks very much. I really appreciate it. But yeah, I think it's very interesting how to give a clear pictures about the social culture dynamic in Borneo Island in particular, in relation with this transformation of this landscape from previously most forested areas into now more large agricultural activities, including mining. And I think there are many, apart from just about ethnic culture issues, but there are also new social cultures transformation, particularly related with this. I often call it as environmental refugees and migration to Borneo as part of this, large-scale agricultural development, mining, as well as the new capital city in Borneo. So I think we need to put this into this Borneo assessment report as a whole. So they are not separated from the other aspect like geography, environment, forestry, wetlands, and so on. They are part of it. I think this is a very big challenge for us, for the social cultures, for the indigenous people, expert or scientists to write down about this. And I still remember what Prof. Jeff mentioned earlier. Actually, we are not trying to put something like a really scientific report, but the most important thing, how we can use this kind of scientific information, studies, and so on to create it more communication style for the policymakers, for the stakeholders, to easy to understand and to understand, and most important, how to create strategic recommendation. Yeah, and not only in terms of policy issues, but also into practical on the ground. And including, I think, the very big challenge of Professor Torres. I think it's huge. I mean, there are many studies on this kind of environmental economic valuation of the forest in Borneo and the other part of Indonesia. And the issue is also about the payment for environmental services already implemented like 20, 25 years ago in Indonesia. But the problem is how we can actualize this into the real financial and investment stream. Yeah, including like through this carbon trading, through the REDD plus result-based payment, for example. I think this scheme is really fails to capture the whole ecosystem services into the forest ecosystem. So that's why, for example, like REDD plus result-based payment or result-based contribution at that moment, just give monetary values of the ecosystem services as whole through the biomass itself, through carbon. So we just disregard other values, ecosystem values from biodiversity, from other, for example, water and so on, something like that. And the last one, I think, Prof. Jatna, we need also to have a clear picture, because in Borneo, there are just two big portion, right? Lowlands and upland areas. And lowlands is very important because Kalimantan or Borneo actually one of the largest tropical peatland, including mangroves, apart from the hilly upland area. So it is very important because they're very strategic in terms of climate change, in terms of the agriculture and so on. I think that's from me. Thanks for entrusting me to sit into the social and cultural aspect. Thank you.
Thank you. I guess the time is already almost up. So, Pak Narto, do you have anything to do?
Yeah, actually for the closing, we need to just have like general idea on what will be the next step. And my suggestion, I think, is we're gonna have like follow-up meeting with the clusters, and then we can have like timeline within the cluster and then sub clusters and so on. That's okay. Maybe in next week or so. Sure, you can plan.
Oke, Bapak Ibu, terima kasih atas kehadirannya. Thank you very much for the attending this very important. I think we heard from Jeff. Jeff, I think, is going to see the president either tonight or maybe tomorrow. So I think he will deliver the message. I think this is really good, and hoping that in the future kita sama-sama untuk writing the assessment, and I think the timeline will be given to you all, and I hope that together. Thank you very much.
Yeah, yeah,